Hey everyone, welcome. We'll get started here in 1 second. Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Pat, obviously co-founder of Madefor, and excited today to welcome Samar Hattar, one of our advisors at Madefor. And really, aside from Andrew Huberman, maybe one of the first people that we brought on, and we're really excited to work on this program with, and specifically on the rest month. So today we're going to be talking about some of Samar's research as it relates to light. Dr. Samar Hattar is a senior investigator and chief of the section on light and circadian rhythms at the National Institute of Mental Health. And his research focuses on the light effect of circadian rhythms, sleep, mood, and learning. And he's got a whole depth and breadth of experience that touches on a lot of things that are salient to Madefor and specific to the rest month. So just so excited to welcome Samar, you today. Thank you for being here and for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Pat.
Awesome. Okay, so my first question, well, I guess my first comment is, Samar, we're long overdue for a swim. I think the last time that Samar and I got in the water together was right before the pandemic. So Samar, I'm excited for you to come back to the West Coast soon so we can get back in the water. So I'm looking forward to that.
That would be wonderful, actually.
Amazing. My first question, and this is just something that struck me in prepping for this, is that you are the chief of section of light and circadian rhythms. You're a chronobiologist, which I didn't even know what a chronobiologist was when I first started working on Madefor. But you are out of the National Institute of Mental Health, which is the lead federal agency for researching mental disorders. So I guess my first question is, what does light have to do with mental disorders? And maybe we'll start there.
Oh my God, Pat. Honestly, I could spend an hour about this question. And I just want to mention that everything I'm going to say here is personal and has no association with mental health. But yes. I could tell you a very quick story that actually my grant when I was at Johns Hopkins University was rejected by the Mental Health Institute. And that's common knowledge. So I could say that because they asked the same question you ask. What does light has to do with mental health? And then 2 years later, after they see all the data that my lab was publishing, they hired me into mental health. So you could tell that I finally convinced them. It took me 2 years, but it was from me rejected to now I'm in the internal program in mental health. And the reason they hired me and they appreciated how light is important, because they appreciated that light is not important for us to see this presentation only. That's only one component of light. Actually, light has a more fundamental, in my mind, a more fundamental and more ancient and maybe more universal than simply high acuity vision that us primates have, which is really regulating many essential behaviors in organisms, including us humans, which include our sleep-wake cycle. Sleep-wake cycle, anybody who doesn't sleep well can appreciate how their mood is affected. Anybody who travel across different time zones can appreciate the first few days how your mood is affected. And these effects of light are impinging on these functions, which include the chronobiology or circadian clock. Circa is approximate day, circa approximate, and DN is day. So they really appreciate it. And in fact, not only they hired me into the MH when I came in, now we have a section, I mean, the name is a little quirky a little bit, but we have a whole section in the NIH called Rhythms and Blues, because we literally assembled a whole team now. Actually, the last I counted 8 to 10, from child psychiatrists to autism researchers to sleep researchers, because light has such a fundamental aspect on our behavior.
Wow.
Sorry, it's a long-winded answer for a simple question, but it's
no, not at all. I think I love the title of the group, Rhythm and Blues. I think it makes a lot of sense, and obviously something that we talk about in Rest Month and something that you extensively study is this idea of entrainment, and that when you're properly entrained to the surrounding environment, things work better. Our brain, our body, our mind, everything just performs at its optimal level. But if we're not entrained or not in sync, then that has a cascading and detrimental effect on both our physical health, but also our psychological and mental health. And maybe I'd love if you could share a little bit about what is entrainment? What does it mean to be entrained, and what role does that play as we're thinking about light and dark cycles?
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little deep, and if you think I'm going, just stop me, right? I mean,
we're here to go deep.
So what's really amazing is in 1998, this is also a very recent discovery. We found that biological clocks are not only restricted to the brain, that actually most of our tissue in our body have a circadian clock, even your stomach, your lungs, your skin. So not only neuronal systems, not only your neurons in the brain have a clock, but also your peripheral organs.
And what does the circadian clock mean, Samer, before we get too deep?
Oh, sure. Circadian clock it's an amazing biological phenomena that, again, the molecular details of it were only discovered in the 90s. So it's a recent discovery as well, where for an amazing ability, the cell at the single cell level, the cell can measure time to an approximate 24-hour period. Not exactly 24 hours, but approximate 24 hours without any clocks, without any batteries, just your cell. You take a skin cell, put it in a dish. That cell can measure 24-hour period. It's quite remarkable, right? I mean, for a cell to measure 24-hour day, that tells you also the importance of the day-night cycle that was imprinted in all of our cells in our body. So that's what the circadian clock. You want me to go into the details on the molecular basis of it, or that's good enough?
No, I think that's good. That helps frame that every cell has this clock or this ability to regulate around a 24-hour cycle. That's very helpful.
Right. And just so people, if they want to mention, we actually understand the clock on such a molecular details that from the bacteria, the original clock, cyanobacteria, we were talking before the show, before this started, we could actually literally create a clock in a test tube without any cellular components. So that's how much we now understand the biological basis of the clock. And I'll be happy, Pat will give you my email to answer any questions for anybody who's interested more. So that the fact that there are more clocks in our body means that you need an orchestra an orchestra head to make sure that they are all rhythmically functioning at certain times of the day. So for example, you don't want to be hungry and sleeping and having to go to the bathroom at the same time. That would be a disaster, right? So they have to be in different phases. Your sleep has to be different from your phase of you're going to the bathroom, has to be different from the phase of you eating or being active. And the orchestra is in our brain. And the orchestra in our brain in a region just outside the roof of our mouth in the hypothalamus, and I'll mention the name, maybe it's not important, I'll mention it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. And this SCN is where the master pacemaker resides. This is where the pacemaker is the head of the orchestra that allows all the peripheral clocks to have a certain phase relationship. So when you're entrained, not only your brain is entrained to the outside world, but all your peripheral clocks are also in sync with one another. So you go to sleep at a certain time, you wake up at a certain time, you get hungry at a certain time. And you could see for people who are really entrained very well, they don't need a timer to tell them when to go to sleep. They don't need a timer to tell them when to wake up. They don't even need a timer to tell them when to have lunch or dinner, because their clock is so perfect. It will tell you before these events that you're ready to do that. And why is this important? Because let's say you're eating. If your clock is entrained, your digesting enzyme will start being prepared before you eat. So when you eat the food, you get much more impact of your food. When you go to sleep, your sleeping hormones are going up at the right time of the day. So when you go to bed, less than a few minutes on, and then you're going to sleep. And then when you sleep the night, you sleep continuously, and then you wake up in the morning and you've got rid of your homeostatic drive for sleep, and you're waking up refreshed and ready to go. So that's why Pat said, if you're entrained, not only your sleep-wake cycle is affected, but your whole physiological system is affected, and it's affected in the right way.
So this SCN is this master clock, and it is the one that is helping all of the other clocks across our various systems, whether it's digestive or nervous or endocrine system, understand where they're at, how to orient in time as it relates to light dark cycles, so they can optimally perform. And and this SCN, what sets that? How does the SCN clock get set or get entrained to the light dark cycles?
So it's remarkable, right? The SCN receives direct light input from the retina. So, the retina projects to the thalamus, the visual cortex, to allow us to see these images, but a subset of cells that leave the retina make a direct connection to the SCN. And for so many years, people didn't understand why these cells project to the SCN and what's their function. And now we know that these cells are the cells that I helped discover in 2002 are the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or what we're going to refer to as iPRGCs. I'll be happy to go more, or I'll wait for your questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. So these iPRGCs these cells that you discovered inside our eyes, they're picking up light dark cycles subconsciously. So it's not even the intensity of it. Are not always registering with us. It's happening on a subconscious level, but that light coming into our eyes is linking up with the SCN, setting that clock, and that SCN is there by setting the clocks, our various clocks across our entire body. And I think this is a really important point, and something, obviously we're going a little bit deep here, but my hope is that when you come out of this session, you're going to have it's almost like you're not going to be able to unsee this. And now when you start to think about the sunlight or engaging light in different ways throughout the day and these light dark cycles, the first thing that's going to come to mind is like, man, I've got not just one clock that's sitting on my phone or on a wall or even in my brain, but actually I've got millions of clocks all across my body that are dependent upon optimally engaging light in my environment. Did I get that right, Samar?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have this, we have these IRGCs, we have this SCN, we've got clocks all throughout our body, and we're setting these clocks by engaging with light dark cycles in our environment. And so when we're properly entrained, that means we're optimally in sync with the light dark cycles wherever we're at. So whether you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, or you're someone that is a night owl or someone that's an early morning person, the part of this is to recognize that you have a unique entrainment to the light dark cycle of your environment. And I want to make sure I have that right as well, Samar, that there's not one pattern of entrainment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to add one thing, is that if you're living in the wild, if you're living outside and you don't have artificial light, entraining the circadian clock is not that hard, actually. It just happens so naturally in the environment that we didn't think about it as a human, still the invention of the artificial light and transmeridian travel. But right now, myself, because I'm doing this, I have lights that I never put at this time of the day. These lights are bright, and because it's subconscious, my brain now is wondering, was there something wrong? Is the day longer? Why am I getting, clearly it's not thinking because it's all subconscious, but why am I getting this bright light information that I usually don't get at this time? So what happens when you do this, your clock starts changing its phase. It adjusts to the environment. Just like all biological systems, they have to be able to adjust to the environment. And so what happens, if you're a person who has an office that is not very well lit, you don't go outside to get sunlight, and your office is dark in the day, then you come home and you put bright lights at your house, especially ones that are rich in blue color, white lights that are rich in blue color. At least I'm using, as you could tell, lights that are rich in red color. I don't use blue light colors in my house because they'll shift me really badly. Then your body's going to say, oh my God, the day is the night and the night is the day. So what happens when you come home, you're actually you're tired from work, but you can't go to sleep because now you get a bright light that decreased your melatonin level, which is the one that sets your sleep onset. And you're not going to sleep very well at night. And then when you wake up in the morning and you go to your dark office, now your body thinks you're in the dark and you start feeling sleepy at work. And you're like, I can't stay up at work, but I can't sleep at home. And actually, you could really explain this by the fact that your entrainment is shifted because you're not getting the natural light dark cycle.
I mean, what blows me away about that is that even though consciously you recognize, hey, I'm home after a long day and I like to have my house well lit, and I know it's nighttime and in a few hours I'm going to turn it off, or I'm going to turn the TV off and then go to bed, subconsciously, which is where we're receiving most of this through these IPRGCs into our SCN, the effects are happening below our ability to register those effects. And
absolutely.
Compounding
it's
over.
funny.
Yeah.
It's funny that consciously evolution is not very good at measuring intensity, because you really don't want your visual system to depend very much on intensity. If that's the case, you're going to look very different in sunlight than in room light. So the visual system, the conscious visual system, try to avoid making calls about the intensity, and what it make calls about are contrast, colors, motion, the stuff that you want to see. But as you said, Pat, very nicely, the subconscious system, all it's caring about is the intensity of light. And it's a very simple system in a way. It's not as complex as the visual system. So if you give it bright light, it thinks it's day. If you give it dim light, it thinks it's night. There is nothing fancy about it. So, but you're not knowing that because if you didn't hear about IPRGC, so you go home, you think, oh, it's okay to put the lights on as long as I switch them off. But what you didn't know is you've already shifted your clock by that time, and your clock is already shifted to a different phase. Even though you're physically in the same time zone, you're literally jet lag in your own town. And literally, there are a lot of people who are walking jet lag into their own city. And that's why they struggle. They struggle to go to sleep. They struggle to stay up at work. They feel tired. They don't sleep well. And all the thing cascades because your homeostatic system, your circadian system, and your environmental system are not in sync with one another.
Oh, wow. It reminds me, one of the conversations that Andrew Huberman and I were having early on when we were ideating around Madefor, and we're specifically talking about rest, and we're trying to think, well, how do we want to frame this month? A story that I shared with him, and I think I talked about this in the rest month, was I just left the military, and in the military, especially in special operations, we're constantly moving, changing time zones. You're working at night, you're working in the day, you're bouncing back and forth, and you never really find an optimal sleep-wake cycle. Certainly, you're not engaging in an optimal, light-dark cycle that would have you properly entrained. And I think the compounding effects of that over years really puts you in a state of chronic stress, I would say. And so when I left the military, one of the first things that I did was I took this trip to this remote island in Indonesia. I like to surf, and I went out there. And when I finally got to this island, I took my watch off, my phone off. My phone didn't work, but I took my watch off, my shoes off, and I was there for a couple of weeks. And what I noticed was that at some point, the way that I framed it is I started returning to the natural rhythms of life. That I ate when I was hungry, I drank when I was thirsty, I woke when the very first sound from the very first bird that I heard outside my window made a noise. I probably was going to sleep much earlier, but I felt rested and recovered and restored in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. And I don't think it had anything to do with surfing. I think it had everything to do with these light dark cycles and not having external cueing and demands that were putting me in a place where I was out of alignment, out of entrainment. And so when I told Andrew this story, he said, well, you have to talk to Samer, because this is what Samer studies, and it so perfectly matches with his research. So I don't know if I've ever shared that with you, Samer, but
you haven't. But this is great. I mean, I'm also like amazed and just think about people in the military, how much they must be putting stress on their body, because I mean, they are selected for being able to withstand a lot of pain and stress. And so they are possibly just saying, we're going to take this pain, but their body is suffering, if you know what I'm saying. So I think that's great that you get this restorative functions that the irregular light dark cycle can give you.
Well, and I think this would probably resonate with everyone, that you don't have to be in the military to be stressed, right? I mean, we all have demands that are placed upon us, and in any one moment, any one demand may not seem that big, but you start to think about the compounding effects of this. And so I know one of the studies that we talk about in the rest month was done out of Brigham Women's University, but they basically found that for people that go to sleep reading an iPad over a physical book, they produce 55% less melatonin, and it resulted in them getting to sleep 10 minutes later every night. And so you can imagine, well, 10 minutes in one night is not a big deal, or maybe, getting some bright light.
Can I say something about the study, Pat? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, please.
Just remember that when they said physical book, they didn't test what the people in physical book were using. So if people were using a very blue shifted light in their physical book, it'll be similar to the iPad. And despite that, they still got 10 minutes. So to me, that's shocking. That's to tell you how, so because if people using lights like the one I'm using now, they will be much less shifted, even though the light is brighter. But they didn't even control for that, and they still get 10 minutes delay in the people that are using iPad, which is mind-blowing for me. And you could imagine if it accumulate across multiple days and then you start sleeping less, it could lead to a completely different outcome. Sorry.
It's incredible. And no, that's so, it's so great. And I think it's incredible and speaks to this idea of being jet lagged in your own hometown, that, we've all probably experienced this feeling of being jet lagged, but you don't think of traditionally when you haven't even traveled, you're feeling jet lagged. But being not entrained to the light dark cycle properly, or can put you in a state of chronic jet lag where you don't even realize, hey, why am I always tired, or why am I hungry at strange times, or why am I not digesting food properly? That it has all of these effects, and these things compounded over time lead to bigger and bigger impacts and impairments in your performance. So anyways, very, very cool. Well, Samar, I know something that you've been talking a lot about is this, and that you're still actively building out, but is this tripartite model as it relates to optimal sleep-wake cycles. Could you talk a little bit about that and how we should think about it?
Yeah, this model came in when I'm trying to prepare for getting more money for my lab. So I had to come up with something really innovative. And I started thinking hard about all my research. And then I was like, oh my God, everything can be explained by this very simple model. And the way I thought about it is that if you think of our life, it has always three components. Every biological system has a homeostat. And we don't understand why, but the cells like to function within a certain range. They don't like to go below it or above it, like your heart rate, for example. It has a certain number, 120/80. It's just, that's the way it is. We don't know why, but that's the way it is, right? So that's the homeostat. Then you have the circadian, which we've talked about a lot, right? The day-night cycle. Then there's the environment. And the environment, you could imagine anything in the environment, right? You could imagine light, you could imagine stress, work, and all of these can be lumped together into the environment. So when you think of any biological phenomena, let's take sleep. It has three components. First, your homeostatic drive is determined by how much you're awake. The more you're awake, the higher your homeostatic drive to sleep. Then your circadian clock will tell you when to sleep in the day-night cycle. That's what the clock does. It tells you when things happen. And then light can either reconfirm or confuse the two systems. So if light is happening when your homeostatic drive is really high, it's weird because this is when the time you're supposed to be sleeping, why there is a lot of light at that time. Or when light is happening when you're waking up, but not when dark is happening when you're waking up, it's also confusing. Why is still dark when I'm up and supposed to be day? So what I found is that if you think of any biological phenomena, and you think of these three components, you could always adjust your life to fit that indication. So this is for sleep, for example. So you want to get light in the morning when you wake up, because that's when the day happens. You want to avoid lights at night when you want to trying to go to sleep. You want to have an entrained circadian clock, and you want to drive your homeostatic drive high in the day. So be active, spend energy so that the body is ready to spend the time to relax and go to sleep at night. So it fits. Now you look at food. Food is even easier to understand. Hunger is homeostatic. If you don't have enough calories, you feel hungry, even if it's outside your day. But you also have a daily time course of feeding. And then the availability of food or activity or sleep is also, which is controlled by the light-dark cycle, tells you when to eat. So that's also, you think about that and you organize your food and your light around that. And as Andrew says in his talks, when we've talked about that if you adjust your light and feeding, you could actually enhance your ability to adjust to a new time zone. So one of the things that we're now talking as a circadian biologist is that when you travel to a new time zone, try to avoid eating at the wrong time of day, because that gives your body, again, the wrong time cues. Because even though you're trying to adjust, let's say, to Amsterdam, if you're eating at New York times, it's still going to confuse your body, because now you're getting food signals that are not supposed to be there in the time of Amsterdam. So that's why I'm so excited about this model, because it's so simple, yet I honestly feel that it can explain biology in general. The same thing can go for psychiatric problems, for everything you think about it with the environment, a homeostat, and the daily rhythm, and it all fits together. Going to the bathroom, everything.
So, Samer, we're gonna get into some questions here in a minute, and I want to make sure that we talk about, before we do that, what does an optimal engagement of light dark cycles look like? So what would be the prescription that you would recommend for everyone? But before that, I just one question for me, as you think about the tripartite model and the homeostatic pressure, environmental inputs, or just our internal clocks, to what degree are these set by to what degree are these are these individualized? And as part of this, I think what I love so much about your information is that, one, these things that we can do are free. Sunlight is free. The way that we engage our environment is free, and it's ultimately something that we can control. But to what degree is there an element of exploration here to understanding these levers and exploring what right looks like for you, as opposed to saying, hey, there's one way to do this and we should all be doing it this way?
That's a fantastic question. And possibly that's one of the most complicated, but I think I've thought about that enough to give you what we know at this moment.
Okay.
So clearly, every biological phenomena that we know never has a single point. It's always a Poisson distribution. There's always people on the extreme, and most people are in the middle, and the middle has a lot of levers. So let's take something that we could easily understand, all of us. The amount of sleep. The amount of sleep varies between humans, between 5.5, the lowest end. Some people would need only 5.5 hours, and that's proven to be enough for them, to some people who need up to 10 and a half hours of sleep. So you could see there is a variability. Now, most people need 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep. So what do people tell you? You have to sleep 7.5 to 8 hours. That's not true. Because if you're the person who needs 10 hours, you need 10 hours. Sleeping 8 hours is not going to be sufficient. And if you're the person who sleeps 5.5 hours, sitting in bed awake is not going to help you either. So the same thing, I think, for the biological rhythms. We have a variation. I think the variation is exacerbated because of artificial light. I don't think, that's why I think it's complicated. I don't think we have an exact knowledge what that range is. But I believe that there are people who are more on the early form, like me. I like to go to bed early, wake up early. And people more on the later form, where they may be, instead of going from like 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, they go from 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock, or even 11:30 till 8:30. And that's all fine, because as long as when you wake up, you expose yourself to sunlight and you try to avoid bright lights at night, your biological clock will have this phase relation with the light dark cycle. You're going to get enough light in the day to adjust it. And one thing that we still don't know how to test this, because it's so complicated, there is no doubt that the history of the light you get in the day can protect you from exposure to bright light at night. How does this happen? Why does this happen? We don't understand. So what I also tell people, when you expose yourself to brighter light conditions in the day, and by bright light, I don't mean you have to sit under the sun. Just go outside in the shade. And on a sunny day in the shade, you'll get so much more photons, as we possibly talked about this, than even any bright room you get into a building. So if you do that, you're going to be even more resistant to changes in the light at night. So light at night is not going to influence you as much as it would have if you haven't exposed yourself to brighter light conditions. It's as if this biological clock in the brain has a way to tell what your history of light exposure is, which I would love to discover how it does it. But it seems to say, okay, let me compare what is the intensity of light at noon versus now. And if at noon is so much brighter than now, then the clock says, okay, ignore this light because, there was much more brighter light at noon, which is really remarkable. How does it do it? We still have no clue, to be honest.
I think your paper on that's going to come out next year.
I hope so. Oh my God, I would be so happy. I don't think so.
Okay, so as it relates to a prescription or a prescription, if you may, the idea is in the morning you want to get natural light outside. Doesn't matter if it's cloudy or if it's light. You don't necessarily even need to be standing directly in the sunlight, but light and no barriers to that light between you and that natural sunlight for a period of time. What's that time if you could will it upon the world that everyone would get this amount of sunlight in the morning? What would that be?
I mean, me and Andy talked a lot about this. We figured 15 would be a good compromise. I would say if you could do an hour, it's great. Like for me, if you're driving, for example, and let's say you leave home early in the morning, when the sun is first coming out, it's not going to affect your vision. Actually, it's very soft and it's very nice. And you see people wearing these very dark sunglasses, and you're literally shooting yourself in the foot. You have this natural sunlight while you're driving to get into your brain, and you're literally wearing dark sunglasses to say, no, I don't want that because I'm sleepy and I feel druggy and I want to feel this way, even though I'm driving and I could have accidents. So I never understood the idea of wearing dark sunglasses. Maybe you need some lighter, but like really dark sunglasses. You see people with really dark sunglasses early in the morning. That to me, I've never understood.
Okay.
So, stuff like that, simple stuff like that. Just as you said, once you see this, start thinking, what is the best way to tell my body, this is the morning, this is noon, this is evening, this is night. So just that light should be just a confirmatory factor that is telling your clock and your homeostat to have this tripartite perfect, so you could have perfect sleep and perfect physiology.
Wonderful. And so pursue natural light in the morning for a period of time, 15 minutes.
And if you didn't do it in the morning, if you didn't wake up, pursue it at noon. It doesn't matter. As long, like I go have my lunch outside in a nice day, even when it's a little bit hot or a little bit cold, I still go have it outside because it's just good for you to get this reconfirmation. The best is in the morning light. There's no doubt that morning light is better. But even if you didn't get it in the morning, try to get it at noon. Try to get it in the evening. It just all these. All this will tell your body something.
And then at night, as we're thinking about powering down our bodies or getting ready to rest, or the sun is starting to set, I always like to frame things in terms of a pursuit, that the objective here is a pursuit of natural light. And so the opposite of that, in pursuing natural light, maybe you're moving away from artificial light, especially intense light, the later you get at night, because that is going to be the thing that starts to reset your clock or impair your clocks, and your entrainment in the environment. But any recommendations or guidance how you think about light at night?
However, because we're humans and we have so much information, we actually have some way to hack the system. And the way that I tell my students and people who ask me this question is you have to do the experiment at your house. I can't tell you. So let's say you have a light fixture that has 5 light bulbs. Unplug 2. Wait for 2 minutes and see that will not make any difference for your vision. So what I tell people, try to use the lowest amount of light that's going to make you see comfortably, not trip, not hit yourself. That's the one you want to use. You don't want to use extra. You want to see, you want to be able to have freedom of movement. You don't want to trip. But at the same time, because I told you our visual system adapt to different light level, we usually, when I go to homes to my friends' houses, I'm like, you guys literally have 100-fold, and I'm not kidding, 100-fold more light that you need to see. And they're like, no, we don't. I said, okay, let's switch this. We switched like 4 out of the 7 pictures. And then 2 minutes later, they're like, oh my God, we can't see any difference because your visual system adapted to that level. And if you allow it to adapt to the lower level, the lucky part for us, it's lucky, it's whatever, is that the IPRGCs are not sensitive to light, but the rods and cones are very sensitive to light. So you can, in a way, use very dim light conditions to see normally without affecting your clock. That's why I don't know if you've ever shared the video of my house at night, especially in the winters. I use candlelight because I can see really perfectly, and I know candle lights will not shift the human circadian clock. There is no way. But you don't have to use candlelight. But you could do the experiment at your home. Switch off fixtures, wait for 5 minutes, and then you'll be like, "Oh my God!" You'll be shocked.
Perfect. And I think, for those of you that are in the rest month or the rest challenge at Madefor, part of this is engaging the natural light and in training to the proper light dark cycles. But there's another part of it where you're taking a proactive, positive pursuit towards something that is inherently good for you. And that's a part of the mindset that we're cultivating at Madefor. So even you might say, well, I get light on my way to work, or I get light through my normal day. I think there's an additional benefit and upside to saying, you know what, this morning, I'm going to pursue natural light for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, and I'm going to get in the habit of that, recognizing that you're doing that to entrain properly and to set yourself up for success as it relates to sleep. Yeah.
I love what you're saying here, because I want to just add that remember the tripartite system, the environment is light majorly, but think about it when you're also running in the morning. Not only you're getting light, but you're getting activity. So you're telling your body dual ways. Now the environment has two components into the system, because now you're getting light, but you're also getting activity. So, so you want to think of the best way to give the best clues to your system, so it'll be more resistant to change and it'll be fully entrained. Because the word entrained is actually great, but it doesn't tell that there are different levels of entrainment. There are people who are entrained partially, there are people who are fully entrained. So I think what you want to do is to try to get, when is the best time for me to exercise? When is the best time for me to add more component into the homeostat and the circadian system, which is what you're saying, but I'm saying it in a scientific way for my research. But what you're saying is the positive pursuit would be similar to saying, I'm going to get the sunlight and also exercise in the morning, for example.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think it speaks to there's a reason why rest is at the end of Madefor, not because it's the least important, but because a lot of what you're working on is around good sleep hygiene and also affecting this tripartite model, whether it's understanding the fuel that you're eating and how it's affecting you, or cultivating a connection or a mindset of gratitude, or moving your body or breathing and getting outside, exposure to nature, so you can envision at some point, you're going for a walk first thing in the morning, thinking about something you're grateful for, maybe going alongside friends, and you're affecting lots of parts of this that then set a foundation up for an optimal night's sleep while also getting entrained. So, Samra, I'm going to shift to some questions because we got some great ones coming in. And if at any point anyone wants to ask their question directly, you can just raise your hand and we'll make sure to call on you. But so feel free to do that. But the first question that came through is someone was talking about being a night owl, and I know you've covered that. We're all wired a little bit differently based upon our genetic makeup or our environments. But the question is, if someone is out of entrainment or out of cycle, how long does it take to get entrained or to get resynced back up? So if someone starts to optimally engage the light dark cycles, could they start to notice a positive impact on their sleep or how they're feeling throughout the day?
Yeah, so the night owl is possibly, as I said, there must be an extreme situation where some people are true night owl, where they have to sleep at 2 a.m., wake up at 10 a.m. But I ask the people who think they are night owl to think of their schedule. If you're already a night owl, which means that you're avoiding the most important part of the morning sunlight. So what you want to do, just to see if you're truly a night owl, is try to wake up earlier a couple of days, and it's not going to happen within a couple of days. You need at least to do this, let's say, for 14 days. I know it's a long time, but if you want to test, and try to get this early sunlight in the morning and avoid bright lights at night. If your body doesn't shift, then you're truly a night owl. This is something that is controlled by your internal clock, and it's not going to be shiftable to light. I would say there are very few people that will really fall under the situation. Although if you look at the sleep-wake pattern of the population in general, you'll find that most people have this situation because of bright light. So that's what I would do. So unless you're truly a night owl, where you have a genetic composition, and we have now tested to some people who have late phase syndromes, then I would say changing the light environment where you actually expose yourself to light early in the morning, avoid lights at night, should allow you to shift. And at least I would say most people easily within 14 days will sleep 1 hour earlier minimum. And that would be huge, right? If it allows you to sleep 1 hour early, more in the morning before you go to work, that could be a huge advantage.
Yeah, that's massive, especially you think about that compounding over time. So
exactly.
So run the experiment for 14 days, or engage the rest challenge for 21 days, and start to notice what right looks like for you, and you should see some effects on that. So awesome. The next question is around someone was asking, I know you mentioned looking at the light, the sunlight through sunglasses in the morning, and how that's a real missed opportunity. But the question was around our car windshield and driving to work. When you talk about sunlight, you say it's perfect, it's complete, it's beautiful, and ideally there are no barriers between us and sunlight. But what effect would a car windshield have, or even an office window have, in terms of the light and the effects that we're looking for?
The front of your car, by definition, has to be incredibly clear because they cannot block the light. So the front of the car is not going to change, and so that should be good enough. The light you get from the front of the car. Now, some people will tint their glasses, and that would clearly block the light. So it depends on how much tint do you have in your glasses. So you don't want too much tint to block the intensity of the light. But in general, the front of the car, the glass is completely transparent. It should not have a problem.
Okay, great. So next question is from, let's see, I've got one from Rain here. So this question is there any science behind moonlight correlating with menstrual cycles, viewing moonlight regulating woman's cycle, or is that woo-woo nonsense?
Wow.
So I'm not sure if you...
It's amazing who asked this question. That's a great question. I actually saw a couple of talks in scientific meetings about this, and I thought it's crazy, but the data is compelling. How is it doing it? I don't know. But there is no doubt that, at least correlation-wise, there is an incredible correlation between the moon cycle and menstrual cycle, for example, and as well as other things. Now, in the wild, the moon cycle has clear circulunar effect on some organisms because they can tell the pressure of the movement of the ocean. So it has a... But why is it on humans? I don't know. It's really great. The data that I've seen is convincing. The mechanism of how it's happening, is it through light or something else, is still unknown. But the data is convincing. It's not a voodoo science.
And this was Rain's question. Rain, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have a comment or a follow-up to that? I'll let Rain come off, find the mute button. Give her a minute. Maybe she was just saying it was my question. But thank you for the great question, Rain. Super interesting. That's an area that I had not was not familiar with, so I'll look into that as well. I'd love to see those papers, Samer. So amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there is no doubt that there is a correlation. I'll send you the papers. It's the data is very strong. Even some evidence which is not published for mood correlation. I think it's still the light. I still think people, like when you're driving at night and the moonlight is full, you could. But we'll see. Yeah, I'll send the information for you, Pat. Rain is asking. Yeah,
we'll make sure to get that to you, Rain, or we'll post it up inside the community. So thank you, great question, and thank you, Samer. So next question is from Bob. How do the circadian clocks of people who live near or north of the Arctic Circle adapt to the months of extended daylight in the summer and months of extended darkness in the winter? Has there been any research around this, or is there something you've looked at, Samer?
That's a brilliant question, and you took the extreme situation, but I could tell you in places like Finland and Sweden, people talk about being completely lethargic, tired in the winter month, and completely manic in the summer. I mean, when I went to Finland, I was shocked that they had these curtains. I'm like, why do they have these dark curtains? Like thick, dark curtains in the room. And then I was trying to sleep at 9 o'clock and the sunlight is still like bright in my room. I'm like, aha, that's why they have it. They can't sleep. At 9 p.m., the sunlight is still bright in the summer, for sure. And then they tell you in Finland, there is a joke that, are you one of the courageous people who could visit us after November? Because the dark is overwhelming. So the answer is, just like the military, just like us, people adapt to it, but that doesn't mean they are adapting very well. There is a very high incidence of depression, even with all the social benefits that these Scandinavian countries have. That happens in the winter. So clearly we could do certain level, we could protect certain level of the population, but there are some people that's just is too much, and I could imagine if I was living in Sweden, the darkness in Baltimore gets to me, and it's not even close to what happens in Finland and Sweden. So yeah.
I'm curious, as a follow-on to that, Samer, if you're someone that is, maybe you're a frontline healthcare worker, or you're in the military, you're in one of these jobs where you're not able to control or optimally engage the natural sunlight. How should you think about that? If say you're someone that works in complete darkness, and it's suboptimal, but you still want to try to do your best through that, are there things that you would recommend doing to try to?
I have to say this is one of the most unsatisfying thing, because I couldn't think of anything. People say stuff, but I'm not confident with it. And what's really interesting, Pat, if you look at the numbers, first of all, you see that these jobs usually are taken by people who don't have a lot of resources, but, usually minority groups, because they need the jobs, but they don't have other possibilities to do other more cushy jobs, right? So, and the second thing is most people quit. It's not easy to do these jobs. We really don't appreciate our healthcare workers or people who have to do these shift schedules, but they really struggle. And it's tough because, not only you're not able to adjust for a period, you're shifted all the time. So you're like as if you're traveling. And I remember one time I was giving a talk to the trustees at Johns Hopkins about my research. And a person who owned MGM said, I used to go to Japan. And I don't like to say this word as a person with mental health, but he literally told me I wanted to kill myself after 6 months. And I said, I need to stop. I couldn't do it anymore. And I could just imagine people who are under this constant shift work schedule. It's very tough. And I honestly don't have an answer. One thing I could tell you, in Denmark, they found a much higher correlation between breast cancer in both male and female nurses with the shift work schedules. So now like they include, shift work as a factor for cancer, which actually the health workers are getting compensated for that. So, we just have to appreciate what, people who do shift work do for us, to be honest. And it's sad because it's the whole idea is counterintuitive, right? Because you're going to work at night. So you don't want to get dim light condition when you're working at night, because then you're asleep on the job and you fail. Because imagine if your homeostatic drive, your clock is telling you to go to sleep, and now you take away the environmental input, say, I'm going to take away the light. Your body's going to go to sleep. People have took hidden pictures of doctors who are on these schedules where they literally have the needle in the patient and they are sleeping on the patient's shoulder. It's just like you're in the middle of the action and you go to sleep. So
I know one thing that we, and I love your thoughts on this, Samer, but in the special operations community, I think something that we kind of navigated our way into is that we recognized we couldn't necessarily control our exposure to light, but what we could still control is how we're eating, how we're exercising, and trying to use those as signals to drive our body in a way that was helpful or conducive to the environment that we had to operate in.
My only concern with this is, again, you have to imagine the physical level that people in these jobs, that special ops compared to the general public. Like, I can't do it. It's you have a certain training that I think the only thing that I would suggest, maybe the only suggestion that I would think is don't do a quick shifts. Try to stick to a schedule for a long period of time. So do 3 weeks, 3 weeks, for example, instead of like 5 days, 5 days, 5. That would be disastrous. So at least try to maintain. And when you maintain, try to maintain your schedule at that time. Take a couple of days to adjust as if you're traveling across different time zones, and then stick to that schedule. That's the only thing I could do. And it's tough because, you have to avoid light when you're coming back at home. And so there is a lot of still problems, but at least that's the best advice I could give. That's usually the question that hurts me the most because I don't have an answer. I mean, for people in Scandinavia, I always tell them just get these very bright light boxes. That should help you in the winter. I mean, this will help. So, but for shift work, it's hard because there is competing. What you said makes sense, but I think it requires a certain physical capability. So I have to be careful about telling it to the general public, at least.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. You mentioned these light boxes, and I see there was a question around blue light and melatonin, and is there any validated science behind the blue light glasses? I know this is something that you've talked about in the past, but maybe you could share your thoughts on blue blockers in general.
I don't like blockers in general because I think we are not meant to see in a single color. And when I tried the blue blocker glasses, it gave me headaches. I saw the word in a very funny way. So my conscious perception of light wasn't, and that's N equals 1. But I've started reading, and the headache factor was a major, the feeling of weirdness people mentioned also. So I think the reason I'm not too happy with the blue blocker glasses because there are easier way to do it. And, like just dimming your light. Or, just use a general filter that filters all the light. You don't have to just take the blue color because also melanopsin can respond to colors outside the blue. So it's not true that removing the blue, it just lowering the light intensity would be much easier to do.
Perfect. Lizzie, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Just to follow up on what I was asking about the blue light, I'm curious also just in terms of devices that most people I feel are using, prior to bedtime. And if that light exposure with melatonin is kind of ruining people's sleep cycles as well. So I guess that was more my question about the blue light and blue light glasses. If people are reading on their iPads, let's say before bed, could a blue light glasses help?
At least Apple did an amazing thing. Like they really, and usually I have my phone in that level, but because I have light, it's actually readjusting. Usually at night, if you lower the whole intensity to 0 on your Apple phone, you still see it quite normally, and that doesn't affect you as much. You don't have to only cut the blue, Lizzie. You can lower the whole intensity, still see your phone happily, but not get the brightness. Like if you put it to the full bright at night, it would really hurt your eyes and it would truly affect your melatonin. So again, as Pat said at the beginning, I think once you understand about your subconscious, you always want to think about how could I lower the light to the lowest level at night where I could still enjoy what I would like to enjoy, and how could I benefit from the most light in the day. So if you're in your office and the sun doesn't heat your office or doesn't make it hard to read, and you have open the curtains, keep the sunlight coming into your office. So stuff like that, you start thinking about how could I make the day more day and the night more night. And that really just becomes a habit of thinking about it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. That answers that
That's
question.
A great question. Yeah.
Samar, you said something to me years ago that had stayed with me and actually made me remove my phone from my bedroom altogether. And that was that in the middle of the night, if you wake up, and traditionally, the older you get, the more you wake up in the middle of the night, my initial reaction was always to look at my phone to see what time it is, to see how much longer I could sleep for. And you had mentioned that the impact of that on the order of even just a few milliseconds or a second or two is enough to impair your clocks and the regulation of these light dark cycles. And so that for me was like, all right, this goes out of the room, and it's made a tremendous difference. And one of the reasons why we have the challenge frame the way that we do. But I don't know if there's any additional follow-up on that.
Well, actually, I just want to mention why. It's actually the explanation is very clear. When you're sleeping at night and you wake up in the middle of the night, your retina have been deprived of light for so long. So when you open your phone and it has all this bright light, it's like your retina is super sensitive. So, that's why it will have a huge impact, even bigger than what you have in the day. So you have to be careful. That's why I think the pouch that Madefor had is a great way to keep your phone in the pouch, so you don't use it, or just put it outside the room. I totally agree. You don't need it in the middle of the night. And again, just for you to be able to see, because your retina is so sensitive at night, you just need very dim light at night. So you want to either put some of these lights that are very soft on the ground, so you could go to the bathroom without tripping, or dimmable lights. So you want to avoid, because when you wake up in the middle of the night, light is going to be super sensitized.
Amazing. Dylan, you've got your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. So I was wondering, if I'm trying to get like a morning light exposure and then evening light exposure, is it important whether like the sun is in front of me or behind me? Does that have any?
It's a great thinking, and I love your windows. This is so much natural light coming into your room. This is fantastic. You would think that this is something that would, but it's not. It's actually not important at all. In fact, it would be very hard for the biological clock to figure out dawn and dusk by a simple light pulse. So if we could actually trick every organism by giving them a dusk or dawn light and entrain them either to dawn or dusk. So there is nothing fancy. What's fancy is the fact that the clock can keep a history of your life. So if you've been telling the clock all along, the clock will know that this is now dimming of the light, is the sunset, and it's going to get ready for the night. So that would be very nice. That's why I said morning is great, but evening is great as well. Having two pulses of light separated by day will tell your clock more than one pulse of light. Because the more the environmental input is, exercise, food, pulses of light, the more it will allow it to entrain with the tripartite model. But that's a great question. Unfortunately, no, it doesn't tell.
And can I ask a follow-up?
Please.
Okay, so I got really badly phase delayed because I was doing kind of some overnight work, and I had a situation where I was able to get like shifts late in the evening and super early in the morning, like 3:30 in the morning. And so I ended up just like working throughout the night. But because I had been familiar somewhat with your work and with Dr. Huberman's work, I decided that I didn't want to continue with that path, and I wanted to just kind of like reschedule myself to kind of like be more aligned with the daylight time.
How long did it take you to readjust?
So I was at the point where I was like going to bed at 4 a.m. and getting up at 2 p.m. And so I instead of like just trying to go straight to like waking up at like 3:30, I kind of just like aimed to like get up at like 9 and then gradually kind of shift it forward like 30 minutes at a time. So
and how long did it take you to fully adjust, and did it work?
So I've gotten myself up to like 7:30 now. So I've just been doing that for maybe like a week and a half or so, but
that's fast, actually.
That's like a good approach to
yeah, I mean, now you're waking up at 7:30 instead. That's actually fast. I expected it to take longer. So I'm happy for you, honestly. Yeah.
So Samar, is it best to do big corrections or to do these kind of phased?
So that's a fantastic question. Another thing we don't understand about the clock, unless you do something that it causes it to become completely confused and get what is known as type 0 or big shifts. Usually there are limit of entrainment, and they vary in animals between 2 to 3 hours to 4 hours max. So it's easy, and that's the perfect light you're gonna get, can shift you up to 2 to 3 hours. So yes, easier, and you're gonna find it really hard to get the perfect light all the time. So I would say easier shifts. Yeah, don't try to do drastic stuff. Earlier shifts are the best. But the problem is also earlier shifts are harder, because that's why I had a problem with the shift in the hour, because sometimes these 1 hour, your body cannot tell if it's the same or opposite, and it takes a long time to adjust to it. But if you're doing it consistently, like what Dylan has done, it would be better to do it gradually, because you're not going to be able to shift yourself 8 hours in one time. We still don't have the ability to do this in a healthy way and shift an 8 hour at one point. We can't do that. That would be great if we can, but we still can't do it.
Awesome, Samer. I know we're a minute over. 2 more quick questions, Samer, and then we'll wrap. But one question is around the Kindle Paperweight, and so it's not an iPad, but still a screen of sorts. Do you have any opinions, informed opinions, one way or another, around
I don't have an informed opinion, but I would tell you, even iPad, if you use, the flux filters, the ones that Apple have, where it makes it more warm in general. It doesn't take a single wavelength, but it makes it more warm. It shifts it more toward the reddish part, and you lower the intensity. Even the iPad should not be a problem. Just remember that. Make sure you have it controlled by you, because you don't want it to do auto and then all of a sudden splash you in with light. And so if you just figure it out, you put it in a dark room and you try to lower it to the most level. Remember, you always have to let your retina adapt. So you need 5 to 6 minutes before you know what happened, because it's not going to happen fast. Your retina takes time to adapt. So let's say you want to see what's the lowest intensity of iPad you want to use. Lower it. Wait 5 minutes and look at it. Don't look at it when you're lowering. Make sure you're actually trying to let it adapt. And then all of a sudden you'll find out that, oh my God, I could go very low. I could tell you, I don't have a good vision. I'm 52 years old right now. And in my phone, I lower it to the lowest level and I could see it totally normal. And I sleep with the phone in my hand and it falls on the side. And then I don't touch it the rest of the night.
Entirely subjective on my part. I've used a paperweight, the Kindle Paperweight before, and it seems much less intense than the iPad. So I imagine
I'm sure it is.
That's something they designed around. But it's a great question.
I could tell you, you're absolutely right, Pat, because when I'm reading a book, it's like I usually sleep so fast because it's not, you're right. The light from the iPad still gonna have blue colors, and so you're right. Anything that is more paper is going to be less than the iPad. Absolutely.
Awesome. There was a question from Lauren around the Senate Sunshine's Protection Act, the proposal to permanently adopt daylight savings time. And I don't know if you've been called to testify in front of any panels yet, but we'd love to hear your position on this.
I mean, honestly, it's shocking to me. Like, it's the complete opposite of what science. So let me get this right? Everybody in this society is delayed. So what do? You delay them further. Now you're going to make them wake up later and suffer more delay. So I'm really worried, because what is going to happen is that in the winter time, people are going to, instead of having 1 hour cut, 2 hours cut of sleep. Like, I'm freaking out of what's going to happen when we have a permanent daylight saving time and go into winter. My worry is going to be there is a lot of accidents because a lot of people are going to be sleepy. I'm scared about that, because remember, you're already delayed as a population. The population already get more light at night. So what do? You give them 1 hour extra light at night. It's mind-boggling. It's shocking. And to me, to the opposite, you want the population that is delayed, you want to give them more light in the day, especially when the day is shorter in the winter, when people are struggling to wake up already. Now you're going to delay the sun. Now they're going to be going to their work at 7 o'clock in total darkness, being exposed to light at night, being shifted 1 hour later, and they're going to be sleeping like zombies. They're going to be driving like zombies. I'm just so scared. Honestly, I'm actually maybe I'm just crazy. I'm just worried about what's going to happen in the winter month with this. It just shocked me when they said that. I was like, no, change it. It's better to change than to keep it daylight. To me, it's better to change than to keep it daylight. It's just shocking.
You're crushing my spirit, Samer. The Endless Summer is one of my favorite movies, and now you're telling me it's an illusion and it comes at a cost. So
no, I mean, it just think about it. We're all delayed, right? I mean, in the society, 7 out of 10 have it delayed, and like one person is like me. Most people use the light at night because they don't know, so we're delayed. And now you're going to give them more light in the winter when people are even hungrier for light at night, not in the day when they need it. It just, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm telling you, this not going to be good in the winters.
Okay. All right. We heard it here first from Samer. So
and I hope I'm not going to end on this negative one because there's a lot of positivity in life.
Gina, I saw your question. I want to make sure we get to it. Just a quick one. If at night you're at home and you have the option to have lights over your head or below eye level, is there a preference based upon your research, Samer?
It's a complicated question. There is a lot of confusion right now whether light from above will entrain better than from the side. The data is not very easy to interpret because we still don't know the sensitivity of melanopsin in the human retina. My gut feeling with you based on evolution that the light from above is going to be more efficient. The evidence for that is not very strong. So if I would say for safe, because it's not going to make a difference, try the side. It's better anyway because it's not all coming to your eyes. But the evidence is not clear. I can't give you a great answer on this. This is a fantastic question. Not to mention that we still don't know where the cells that project to certain brain regions are located in the human retina. And so that's a completely different story.
Amazing. Amazing. Samer, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all of our members for taking time to be here on a Friday afternoon, evening. So grateful to you all for the community that you're building and the work you're doing. I think something that really excites me about Samer's work and what I think is so special about this topic in general is that we're talking about something that you have complete and absolute, not necessarily complete and absolute control over, but this is something that you have an element of control over, and it's free. You can be in pursuit of natural light and just equipping yourself in with the knowledge of this tripartite model and this idea that when you are entrained to light dark cycles, that the cascading effects of that can be incredibly positive and powerful, not only from a cognitive performance, but from a physiological and psychological performance, and it's worth it. So I hope Samer being here today and sharing his research and knowledge has been helpful to you all and gets you energized and excited about the pursuit of this natural light. Yeah, and then over to you, Samer, for final comment.
One last thing I want to say, I would love if somebody adjusts their self to the light dark cycle if they notice that they sleep less, because a lot of people have mentioned that when they adjust their amount of sleep, their sleep is more consolidated and it's better. So they actually end up sleeping less hours. So something I'm interested in my research, if you feel that in your life, please shoot me an email saying, adjusting made me sleep instead of 7.5 hours, 7 and 20 minutes. It's not going to be a huge change, but it's going to be a change which will give you extra time to do stuff. So I just wonder if people notice that. Sorry, I mentioned.
No, yeah. If you notice that, post it inside the community, and we'll get you connected in Samer. Maybe you can be a part of his next paper. It'd be amazing. Samer, thank you so much. Always a joy.
Thank you, everyone, for the
looking
great
forward
question.
to our swim.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.